Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug Mackenzie, and on today's session, we've got a really important discussion all around how finance can really go green. And we're going to see a really brilliant example of that here today, as we've got two organizations that are really exemplifying that with a partnership. Joining me today, I have Alex Lawson from Western Union Business Solutions and also Sarah Leugers from Gold Standard. So guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm going to do a brief round of introductions. If I could come to Sarah first. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's absolutely our pleasure to have you on. I love talking about this topic. So Sarah, for our audience who might not be aware of you guys, could you tell us a bit more about yourself, your role, and also your organization, please?
Yes, I'm Sarah Leugers. I'm the Director of Communications at Gold Standard Foundation based in Geneva, and I also lead on our private sector engagement. The Gold Standard was founded almost 20 years ago, and we're really about maximizing the impact of any climate intervention towards not just climate change, but also the Sustainable Development Goals.
It's absolutely amazing. And as I was kind of alluding to, that is really going to be the key to today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. And also we have Alex Lawson, obviously from Western Union Business Solutions. Alex, thank you so much for joining too. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Doug. Thank you very much for having us.
It's absolutely our pleasure. As mentioned with Sarah, I just love talking about the topic, so I'm really excited to get in. But I know obviously everyone's heard of Western Union, but could you maybe talk to our audience a bit more about your role at Western Union Business Solutions as well, please?
Yeah, so Western Union Business Solutions, obviously part of Western Union, the larger organisation people are familiar with. And Business Solutions, as the name suggests, helps businesses with their payment needs and foreign exchange requirements. So businesses that are importing or exporting goods or have overseas currency needs. My role within the business, I'm Director of Hedging for UK and Europe. And when we talk about hedging, this is protecting against adverse currency movement. So we won't go into the details of that now, but we're here to help our customers, helping our businesses with their payment needs, but also now potentially also assisting with ESG requirements as well.
That's absolutely incredible. And to be honest, after 2020, we're seeing so many businesses starting to look at that cross-border payment scene, and it's really become such a pivotal part of business banking going forward. So Alex, I'm absolutely honoured to have you on the show as well. Now, to kick off the discussion, I think it's important to kind of outline some of the most important net zero legislation requirements that businesses might be encountering around the world. I think that's going to be such an important RegTech kind of backbone to the whole conversation. So Sarah, if I could come to you and look at some of those legislations, what are some of the key ones that businesses might need to be aware of soon?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. And the North Star, I would say, for net zero is the Paris Climate Agreement. And that aims to balance carbon emissions with carbon sinks by the middle of the century. But following that global aim, there are a number of initiatives and regulatory frameworks that are relevant for business, and increasingly so, as you mentioned. One is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD, which was introduced several years ago to improve reporting of climate-related financial risk. Their recommendations are largely voluntary, but it's moving towards regulation. In the UK, for example, the UK has already announced that they'll be the first G20 country to make TCFD aligned requirements mandatory for Britain's largest organizations. So it's really that first step is about knowing the impact of business on climate change, and also the other way around, the impact of climate change on business, and publicly disclosing that. The Carbon Disclosure Project is another voluntary mechanism that's been around for a while. But beyond just like kind of calculating and disclosing, the next step is actually doing something about it, actually driving change. And again, here are some voluntary initiatives and also some, increasing compliance regulations that businesses are starting to see. Some may have heard about the Science Based Targets Initiative that helps companies set their decarbonization pathway in line with that Paris ambition to reach net zero. We've seen over 2,000 companies setting science-based targets, and now they've recently launched some guidance for the financial sector, which had kind of been the one that a lot of people have been waiting for. Yeah. Just in Glasgow, there's the Financial Alliance for Net Zero, a similar aim. But then we're also seeing regulatory around carbon pricing, where polluters actually have to pay for their carbon emissions. So that's where we're starting to see it hit the bottom line. And I think here in the financial sector in particular has an opportunity to get ahead of that legislation and build that in and future-proof its business and help its customers to do the same.
Yeah, I think
sorry, that's no, please. Yeah, sorry to jump in.
No, do.
We talked about the rules from the UK around the FTSE 100, or the largest listed companies. But a key point that Sarah mentioned there about getting ahead of the game, which is really what we want to talk about today. So our traditional customers are more SME and smaller corporates. And for these guys, they may think, oh, look, this is just something that's affecting the large companies at the moment, and it's not something we need to worry about yet. But it is going to be soon, right? So net zero targets are going to involve everybody. We've heard about how we're all going to have to get heat pumps rather than gas boilers, and all drive electric cars and all the rest of it. But SMEs, the largest bulk of businesses in this country, in the UK, are SMEs. They're going to need to do their part, and sooner or later the regulations are going to come. But why better to get ahead of the game, start managing that risk early, and have a plan in place.
Yeah, it really does have to be enshrined now, and businesses do have to start looking at it, because it will come a lot quicker than people are thinking. And Alex, you've brought up something I wanted to kind of allude to, in the fact that I've mentioned to you in the introduction that a lot of businesses, even small businesses, are now looking at cross-border, everything like that. So for organisations that do operate around the globe, could these legislations, I know the UK, as Sarah, you said, was the first to enshrine it, but could these legislations across the world have an impact on small businesses that are operating from one country but sending money around the world?
Yes, there's certainly discussions around carbon adjusted border taxes, so that will trickle down, as Alex said. It's a fairly fierce debate, and there are lots of kind of geopolitical implications, but the trend is certainly moving in that direction, and it will reach the entire economy eventually.
Yeah.
I think, again, for, as you talked about, customers or businesses, our customers who are interested or have a need to send money internationally, chances are that international transaction is having a carbon footprint. So it may be that they're exporting services, in which case maybe it's limited. But for a lot of our customers, they're importing or exporting goods, they're paying an overseas supplier, and then those goods then need to be shipped across to the UK. So that in itself has a carbon impact. And when they come to measure their carbon footprint, customers trading internationally, chances are they may well have a larger carbon footprint than someone who's trading just domestically, and perhaps in very much in their very local market, rather than around the country. So it is something that certainly our customers need to be taking into account.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, payments and financial services does feel like a very white collar industry, and as a result, it doesn't feel like there's a huge environmental impact. But Alex, with that in mind, what role can the payments industry play in combating climate change going forward?
Everybody needs to do their part. So it's easy to say, we're just sending money electronically, it doesn't have a footprint, but all of the IT resources, all of the computing power and everything, that also has quite a large footprint in many cases. But I think where we're going to see additional benefit, the financial services industry in general is pretty ubiquitous. So we're transacting with every part of the economy, and often the size of the transactions that are going through are substantial as well. So as we're hoping to show today, even just a small difference on a financial transaction can actually make quite a large difference when that difference is invested into something that's going to aid the environment or other ESG topics. So if a business is going to be needing to make a financial transaction, if that can be linked in some way with some sort of ESG benefit, then why would you not want to do that? It's just something you were going to have to do anyway. So really, through the payments industry and the finance industry in general, if we can help make this easier for businesses to start taking those first steps, then I think that's really where we're going to be able to play a part.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be such an important theme of this conversation going forward. And Sarah, if I could ask you, are we seeing the finance industry at large improve its climate impact? Is it one of the industries that is finally looking at itself and reevaluating where it stands?
I think that's just beginning. As I mentioned before, the financial services sector has a tremendous impact. It really enables the future that we're going to build, whether we're locking in fossil fuels or we're, unlocking clean energy that helps countries be independent from energy, energy independent, and provide cleaner air, cleaner water for their citizens. It's such a complex space, though, and historically, the financial services sector has really looked at its scope 1 and scope 2, which is kind of technocratic for its direct impact, but where it really has this influence is in what it finances. And so looking to embed climate risk and climate impact in its decision making, in its products and services, that's where it really can have such an opportunity for driving change.
Amazing.
Interestingly as well, another point on that, some of our customers are financial institutions of various sizes and shapes, but increasingly within the finance world, we find that senior leaders within those businesses have ESG targets embedded into their compensation plans, which is probably not something that happens in regular industry and retail and other things necessarily. So it is an increasing trend. I think the direction now is fairly clear, and at the moment now it's who's going to be getting there first and who's going to be left behind.
And now that's a really interesting concept. Is we've already talked about the regulations, the legislations, and how you really don't want to be left behind on this. And I think that's also going to be a concurrent theme. Now, guys, I'm really interested in this partnership. As I was kind of mentioning at the beginning of the conversation, you two have your organizations have entered into this really exciting combination to really help further some of the change. So Alex, if I could come to you, can you tell us a bit more about the partnership between Western Union Business Solutions and Gold Standard, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this green hedging product that we've developed, if you will, the idea was how can we make it easy to take steps along the ESG path. At Western Union, we're very proud of our ESG report and a lot of the work that the Western Union Foundation does. That's published on our website. A lot of that focuses on access to opportunities, education, and so on. There's a little bit less in there around climate change. So that's something here in Europe that's very important to us and a lot of our customers. And so we're thinking about how can we enable customers to start to take steps to address climate change through a transaction they were going to do anyway. And really the genesis of that, I have a to-do list. And I'm sure many finance directors out there and CEOs, managing directors and so on have a to-do list of things that they need to address. There's going to be things that are always at the top of that. And right now, things like supply chain constraints, the lingering effects of COVID, the possible additional lockdowns and other measures that are happening in Europe. Maybe that's where your suppliers are based. Maybe that's where your customers are based. Maybe they'll happen here in the UK. All of these very much top of mind, interest rates and so on as well. But addressing climate change is going to be on there somewhere, I would imagine. This is something we should probably start to think about. But you know what? I've got all this other stuff I need to worry about first. And I know that when there's something on my to-do list and I'm not sure how to take that first step, that becomes a more difficult proposition than something I've already begun where it's just a matter of continuing. And so we wanted to create a way for our business customers to take that first step, to then have access to additional information that would allow them then to take additional steps thereafter. Because what we're proposing today is by no means the only solution that is needed. It's just another part of the process. So the idea is customers, as we mentioned, come to us to hedge or protect against their currency risk. So if they need to buy US dollars to pay a supplier overseas, if the US dollar strengthens, then it's going to cost more in pounds to buy the same number of dollars than it would have done otherwise. So that eats into their profit margins. So the customer has a need to protect against that adverse rate movement. In order to do that, they buy a hedging product. And a simple example of this is a forward contract where you can fix a rate of exchange now for a date in the future. So I order my goods from China, they come hopefully in 90 days, and I pay for them when they're landed in the UK. So during that 90 days, I don't want the rate to move against me. So I fix the rate now and I pay it in 90 days. I know that's the rate I'm going to get. So very simply, that's what a hedging contract is. Customers need to do this all the time. If they're importing goods, exporting services, anything else. So we decided that actually we could harness that transaction and use that to then divert some of the revenues that are generated from that transaction to a partner organization who would be able to invest those into environmental projects, potentially with carbon offset outputs. We wanted to be quite ambitious with who we partnered with, which is why we approached Gold Standard, and they are literally out there to set the benchmark, the gold standard for this whole world. So we spoke to them, and they were very interested and keen to be involved as well. So the way that it then works, a customer will call us up. They want to fix their rate of exchange. And for that contract, for that forward contract that they want to buy, we're going to say to them, if you want to be involved in the green hedging product, then the cost of that forward contract is 0.1% more expensive. So what does that mean? If you were going to sell pounds and buy US dollars, say at a rate of 1.34, instead of 1.34, we show you 1.3387 as an example. So the rate you get is slightly less attractive, but that equates to 0.1% of the notional amount you're going to trade. So I need to fix a forward contract for $1 million US, $1,000 US is the additional cost, if you will, of that contract. In reality, you may well wait for the market to go a bit higher and get 134 anyway, in which case it hasn't actually cost you anything. But nonetheless, the customer is contributing something to this transaction, which was important to us that we wanted to have, we wanted to engage with customers who are also engaged with this climate change topic and that are wanting to make a difference. But in order to maximize that benefit, Western Union then matched that 0.1%. And so we send $2,000 in my example to Gold Standard. This is then invested into a project type of the customer's choice. There are 6 to choose from. And then Gold Standard then creates a certificate retiring some carbon credits, create a certificate for that in the name of the customer for the full 2,000. So the customer gets the full benefit, none of it's coming to Western Union. This then allows the customer to talk to their own stakeholders, their own customers, their suppliers, their shareholders, etc., to say these are the steps we've taken, this is the amount of carbon we've offset through the transactions we've done with Western Union, and this is offsetting some of our carbon footprint. And this is then allowing them to say, okay, we've taken the first steps, now what can we do to maybe reduce our footprint and take other measures as well?
I mean, there's so much to unpack there, because it's just hearing it, there's the matter that it was seamless, and just generally the fact that sometimes it doesn't even impinge any of these business customers. It's absolutely incredible. But Sarah, I also want to get your perspective as well on the partnership and what it can mean for Gold Standard too as well, please.
Well, I really appreciate that Alex is looking at this and Western Union is as just embedding this and making it simple, because we think that it should be standard practice to take responsibility for your carbon emissions and to channel that through, verified impact towards climate mitigation, and also contributing to a just transition to a low carbon future. And that's really core to Gold Standard. And that's why this can support our work, and more importantly, the project developers that seek Gold Standard certification that are delivering this impact all around the world. These funds will be supporting their efforts to expand their project activity. For example, there are community-based projects throughout sub-Saharan Africa where people who had been cooking over open fires are transitioning to clean energy solutions, which is transformative. It has a climate impact, reducing those emissions, but we're also changing the lives of people day to day, where they no longer have to inhale toxic fumes and spend hours fetching firewood, things that we just really don't get our head wrapped around in the developed world. So, just something that's as simple as we've just described can be really transformative on the ground in places that are most vulnerable to climate change already.
Absolutely brilliant. And with that in mind, then, if I could go back to Alex, you for my next question, one of the things you kind of teased from the partnership was the fact that a lot of businesses are very time poor, and a lot of the people that are running them as well really don't have time to operate or even action some of these goals, even if they so wanted to. So in this mind then, Alex, how can this partnership enable businesses to enter the initiative, or at least start working on this impact in a seamless manner, with almost not having to think about it?
Yeah, look, that ease of use is exactly the reason why we've generated this. There's nothing particularly revolutionary in here, insofar as any business would be free to speak to Gold Standard themselves directly and send money, invest in particular projects. Nothing's to stop that, or even individuals, of course, as well. I'm sure all are welcome. But it's this idea again of where do you start? When you go and look on the internet, I'm looking for a carbon offset project, then there's literally hundreds. Who do I know on here? Are any of these people reputable? Do I know that they're doing what they say they're supposed to be doing? Is that money going to the end user as desired, or is any being diverted elsewhere for other reasons? A little bit of a minefield. And of course, then there's always the risk these days, of course, of with social media and everything else, that you get involved in a bad news story and it can be severely detrimental to your business reputation. So this fear almost of not knowing where to start or how to begin is what we try to overcome by saying, look, here we've kind of made it easy. We've done the due diligence for you. We've partnered with obviously a very reputable organization in the Gold Standard. Gold Standard themselves, I'll let Sarah talk to the projects themselves and how they're vetted, but we've kind of made it easy in that sense. We've done that groundwork. As we talked about, the difference on a transaction is very small. And in fact, that kind of move of 13 pips, as we call it, the difference between 133.87 and 134, that's the difference between calling us up before lunch or after lunch, right? The market moves that much all the time. So this is really a very small difference on a transaction. And as we said, it may not even impact you at all. And yet it can have this quite substantial difference. In our example, make this quite substantial difference. In my earlier example, $2,000 going to Gold Standard, if it was going to a project where the average dollar cost per ton of carbon offset was $10, that $2,000 is buying 200 tons of carbon offset, which is a material difference, right? To it's not going to make someone carbon neutral in one go, right? But it's going to, this is more than just, we planted a tree in the car park and you can feel good about yourself. It's making a substantial difference, not just on that carbon offset topic also, but the projects that Gold Standard are involved with address a minimum of 3 of the UN sustainable goals for global development. So, that's also an important point. And again, I don't want to steal Sarah's thunder. I can let her talk more about that. But this, when you talk about seamlessness, it's really that ease as much as anything else. So look, I was going to need to do this anyway. Why would I not? And that's really what we want customers to be asking themselves.
And I think that's such a brilliant concept of the initiative. Now, Sarah, with that in mind, Alex was alluding to some of the extra partnerships, the extra projects, that these businesses could potentially choose from. Am I correct in assuming that businesses can actually choose their project category?
Yes, that's right. I've already discussed some of the community-based projects like clean cooking solutions. There are also amazing projects that source clean water for communities that are relying on, dangerous water sources and have to fetch water from, miles away. We also have what people like to call nature-based solutions. This is regenerative agriculture, afforestation and reforestation, projects that are preserving natural habitats and biodiversity, etc., as well as renewable energy, shifting from fossil fuels to clean energy solutions. And some of these are the ones that we know, like solar and wind, that are very familiar, but also some emerging technologies. Of course, geothermal is gaining some ground, as well as tidal and different ways to harness renewable energy. So the businesses can look at this range of project types and decide, what resonates most with them as a business and what objectives they may have for sustainability, ESG, contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals.
I think that's absolutely incredible, and it's something that should be applauded, is the fact that it's bigger than just the E out of the ESG. You can choose between social and helping out in various different factors. So I think that's absolutely critical, and I love it so much. Now, Sarah, with that in mind, a lot of organizations in finance have been accused of greenwashing. So with the Gold Standard, you really are almost like a namesake, but what methodologies or global standards are these projects and impacts almost linked to? Is there a way that it's quantifiable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we exist effectively to stamp out greenwashing. We're about maximizing impact and making sure that can be credibly claimed. So that starts with how you calculate an emission reduction, and that varies by project type. Those I've described will have very different equations, if you will, to calculate the difference between the project scenario and whatever the baseline was before it was introduced. Renewable energy is very different in reading meters from those clean cooking solutions where you have to know how a community is using these technologies and what their day-to-day activities are. So the methodologies are very different. But that's about the carbon. As we've already discussed, this is about more than just the E. We also measure and verify all of the other impacts I've discussed, improved health outcomes from improved air quality, improved health outcomes from clean water, energy independence, as I've discussed on the renewable energy side. These are all metrics that really matter, and they're measured and verified independently to the same level as the carbon impact. And there's a really rigorous process in that. It happens in multiple rounds by through multiple checks, and it's all publicly available on our registry, not just how the project has been certified, but when Alex has already mentioned that any business that's opting into this product will be able to see what credits have been retired transparently in our registry, just for full transparency. So that's really important to us, that people can trust that the impact has actually been achieved and that their money made a measurable difference in driving change.
Yeah, I think also to add to this, the topic of greenwashing in some ways can be unhelpful insofar as it's often used to say bad things about someone who's not doing as much as you think that they should be doing. And for our customers, I know that, again, this is something that they would worry about. Is this not just greenwashing? Should I just be offsetting using this Western Union solution, or should we be doing more? Yes, absolutely, you should be doing more, but don't let this fear of being called out for greenwashing stop you doing anything. And that's, I think, the risk. And we've seen that already from a couple of customers that we talked to about this. This is a concern that they have at board level. We don't want to be called out for greenwashing. And so we need to think very carefully about how we do this and how we position it. So something that customers need to think about. But the way we've structured the green hedging solution here at Western Union, the reason why we charge the customer 0.1% more, we want them to have skin in the game. We want them to be able to demonstrate that it's something that's important to them. But also through all of our conversations with them, we also want to make clear this is not by any stretch the only step that you should be taking. It's not obviously our area of expertise, but through our partnership with Gold Standard and other resources, we want to provide links to how they can get information on reducing their own carbon footprint, how they can calculate it in the first place, of course, as well, which until I spoke to Sarah, I didn't realize that was quite such a complex process. But no, again, if we can demystify some of that and distill some of the various resources that are out there down to here's kind of what you need to know as a beginning, and here's where to go and find out more, then we want to help customers along this journey. So the green hedging thing should be considered one of the steps that you need to take. But don't let the fear of being called out for greenwashing stop you from even taking that first step. Exactly, yeah.
And it is these small steps that blossom into larger steps, like this partnership that we've been discussing today, and Alex as well. We've kind of been alluding to it, but I'd love to kind of actually get it mentioned exactly. So we were bringing up at the beginning of the conversation about obviously the UK's net zero carbon legislation. Can this initiative, if businesses opt in, actually be counted towards their organisation's ESG reporting too?
Yeah, absolutely. So the gold standard certification is as good as it gets, and absolutely they can be using that. But of course, they need to have measured their footprint in the first place, and they should also be reducing what they can, which of course there are clear benefits for a company to do as well. If you have more energy efficient lighting, for example, your electricity bill will go down. Maybe heating will go down if you insulate your factory or your premises better. And right now, we'd all like lower energy bills, right? So there's clear advantages to a business in terms of doing that. But this ESG reporting, as and when it comes, then this will definitely contribute towards that, and should be part of a holistic approach. But we talked about these rules coming down eventually from the government, currently looking at the larger companies and eventually moving lower. But Sarah mentioned scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. And so some of the big companies out there need to measure scope 3 emissions, the emissions of their supply chains effectively. And as a small company, it may well be that you're making a part that goes into something that's ultimately produced by one of these big companies. So they may already be asking you what you're doing about reducing your own carbon footprint, or what you're doing to address climate change. And here's an opportunity for you to say, look, actually, we're already taking steps here. We've reduced our energy output, or energy input rather, but also we've offset some of our emissions using this Western Union product. So this is going to be happening sooner rather than later, I think.
And I think we're starting to see that there's questions being asked now to really see businesses of all stratas, all sizes. What are you doing? What are your first steps? And this is such a huge one to get started with. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Now, Sarah, to wrap then, where can our viewers find out more about Gold Standard and the partnership in particular?
You can find more about Gold Standard at goldstandard.org. And there, Alex already mentioned, there's an opportunity for any business or any individuals to take action directly through that project marketplace that's there and available, and allows you to make a climate impact and fully traceable and see that retired in our registry. So you can follow us also on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn. And the partnership, we've been happy to also promote through our channels, and more information on the product itself, I will leave to Alex.
Amazing.
Sure. So first and foremost, give us a call. We'd be happy to talk you through in more detail. Online resources, business.westernunion.com, and then look for FX risk management. Within there, you'll find details of all of our hedging products and services, but also a section there on the green hedging product as well. You can download the brochure and so on. But ultimately, we'd love to talk to you about it directly and see how we can start to make a difference with you.
That's absolutely incredible. I've got to say, Sarah, Alex, thank you so much for your insights into this partnership and really kind of spearheading this initiative and really helping finance go green. So I've just got to say a massive thank you, and also a big thank you to our viewers as well. You can catch the rest of the series over at FF News and of course YouTube, but especially LinkedIn, where you'll see me in the comments. Once again, I've got to say a massive thank you to Sarah and Alex. I hope you've had a good time. I've certainly learned so much, so thank you very much and goodbye.